Any more? Lee, it's yours.
Hello everybody, thanks for coming out on this stormy night. Stormy, right? The last thing he mentioned is safety. You gotta think safety number one. One of our former members, Ed Langdon with 2 Ds, works in a cabinet shop. A few weeks ago, he was doing something. He's a supervisor there, right?
You're bright enough.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. He was doing something on the table saw and his hand went across right here. It cut up through all the bones. There was still skin on the top. He said he does not know how it happened. So you gotta not be in a, if you're in a rush, slow yourself down. Physically, mentally, go. Stop, I'm going too fast. Slow yourself down because you don't want an accident to happen. And Don's wife said he had to have his fingertips cut off so they could repair this. Oh, just the pinky?
Right.
Yeah. And he was right-handed. It was his right hand that went through it. So you gotta think safety first. Okay, my demonstration is on these little laminated bowls. And there's a gentleman up in the Carolinas, I believe, named Jim McPhail, M-C-P-H-A-I-L. And if you Google him to see his stuff, you have to put in wood or wood turning, because there's a congressman named Jim McPhail, and he will come up first. It's not the same guy. And he does these little kind of stacked laminated bowls, and they're pretty neat. My friend Dee Trudeau, who used to be a member in our club way back, she has 3 of them in her home that she bought. And Jim doesn't do anything bigger than 5 inches in diameter. Most of them are 2 to 4 inches. There's hollow vessels and bowls, and the ones Dee bought, there's 2 hollow vessels and 1 bowl. Back in 2007, they still the price tag, $160 and $180 each. And now the prices on his website are at $240 and $280 for a little bitty thing like that. She said when he was in line, she was in line at the show with her little bowl. There was 12 people in front of her, each with their own little bowl, waiting to pay. So they're really neat. I've done a few shows with these. I had 8 of them. I only have 4 left. And people pick these up all the time. They're really interesting to look at. And you can make them symmetrical, wood-wise. So I have cocobolo on the bottom and the top. This wide lighter section is curly camphor. And I have some veneers. I have black, yellow, black on top, black, yellow, black, and then 2 bands of purple heart, and then a slice of royal palm in there, which came from in front of the Galleria Mall. Or you can just stack them up any way you want. They look fine either way. Now this one, I'm a little disappointed how it looks, just because I have this wide band of curly camphor in the middle. And I think it's just too plain in the center, even though when you move it, the shimmer from the curl goes around. But this is bottle brush burl on the top and the bottom, and I filled the voids with turquoise, and people grab it and pick it up because of that. So I still may put this back on the lathe and cut a groove and maybe add a turquoise ring in there or something, and I may just forget about it and move on. This one is Bang Ceopod. There's some bloodwood on the top and in here, and again, some of the colored veneers. I'm going to pass these around. There's 3 in 1. Now, the pieces of wood I use are just leftover scraps in most cases. I have little gorgeous pieces of wood that have been left over, and they're kind of too nice to throw out. And I saved a lot of them to do the inlays in the top of boxes. But then I was up visiting my friend Dee and saw those bowls by Jim McPhail. And I've also seen him at the Artisan Center up in Asheville. He's got a nice display up there, and I know he's in that club, I believe. So there's just all kinds of little scraps in here. I have some palm, there's some royal palm, there's some maple in here, curly maple that's plain. This one has dye on both sides, 2 different color dyes. So you can see how much more the curl in the figure shows up with dye on it. This is a real nice piece of lace wood, which would kind of be a waste putting it in one of those bowls, because all you'd see basically, unless you had it on the very top or the bottom where it was open enough, you wouldn't see any of this beautiful curl and figure in here. So that I'm saving. I'm going to put that on top of a box where people can see all this nice figure. And there's some other pieces like that in here. This is a ring left over from tulip wood. Tulip wood is beautiful wood. So this one could be the top or one of the side rings, because on the side of it you can see some figures still. This piece is a leftover from Tom doing his segmented bracelets. He has these little triangles left over off some of the ends, and he glued them up to make a piece for a pendant or something out of it. And he gave Joe, this 83-year-old guy who comes to my studio 3 or 4 days a week, and I showed the first one of those little bowls I made. He kept coming over to my lathe and what are those? What are those? And when it was done, he just went crazy. I've made 80 of them. He's probably got 50 of them done now. But he stacks them up really fast, and he's getting pretty good on not doing torn grain, but the patterns and things he's coming up with are pretty cool. Most of them look like little shot glasses because he's stacking them up out of all small stuff instead of going wider at the top to do a bowl. So there's multicolored shot glasses. But you look in the bottom and you see these, because he's putting these on the bottom of the piece, so you can see that down inside. I have a variety of veneer colors. Some of these are thicker than others. I got these down at Constantine's Wood Center on Oakland Park Boulevard. We have 32nd, 16th inch, comes an 1/8 inch thick, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. There's all kinds of different thicknesses of wood. This is just some kind of wood that's been veneered and dyed. I don't know if they bleach it first. This wood is kind of stringy, so when you see me turning it, I'll go into how to deal with that. And you can easily cut this stuff up with scissors. And it's very pliable and flexible. If I like have a thin strip left over, I can take 2 straight edges and glue them together like that onto my piece as I'm stacking them up, and nobody's ever going to see that seam. So they come out really nice. You can also use plainer woods too. Plus like here's a ring of rainbow spectre ply left over from a birdhouse I did. And that can go as a stack layer or a top. There's a nice piece of eucalyptus burl, which is a rim. I can stack that up in the center. You have to be careful about gluing it and cutting it to leave enough thickness. And that's just a piece of camphor. You can use any of these on these bowls. It just takes a little planning. This is a pack of samples, veneers. Constantine has a whole box full of these up on their front counter. They're free for the taking. And it just shows a bunch of different kind of woods. They're numbered, and it lists them. Now I know exactly how many pieces of wood that are in here, so when this comes back around, I want them all back. Now if you want to glue up a stack, I'll take that. Well, let me have that back for a second. Yep. Now there should be in here. Okay, here's a glue up that I did with several different layers so you can kind of see. There's a cedar and a couple veneers on this side. Over here, there's no veneer between the cedar and the maple, but this is just so how you can see how combining the light colors of veneer or light and dark colors of the wood, you know, what shows up the best. And it's just kind of experimentation, and A lot of times Joe's gluing up stuff and I think that's going to be the ugliest damn thing I've ever seen, and when he gets it done it looks really good. And that's almost the case every time. So on here I have a glue block, which is just a leftover piece of Norfolk Island pine. It's a piece of cherry burl glued on here, which is left over from one of these little pieces. This is going to be the base of my piece, this cherry burl. Now when you're gluing to ingrain Norfolk, you need to seal it because it will suck the glue down inside. I'm using CA glue, and it'll suck so much glue down in there you will not have a good glue joint. So I either take the thin CA glue and saturate it with that, or I spray a couple of coats of lacquer on top of the Norfolk before I glue to it. That way I'm going to get a good glue joint. Now I have thin CA glue that are club orders in medium. If you notice, one's green and one's red. I write all over them in green. I know the green bottle is the thin runny stuff, so I don't have to try and look and read that. The red bottle is the medium. So you don't have to think, you just can grab it and go with it. This saves a little time. Now what I'm going to do is I have my glue block. I'm going to cut back this cherry burl so I have a little wider base because I want to do an open bowl. This ring of cherry burl will be the top edge of it. And then I'm going to layer up, I have some Purple Heart, a piece of palm, some maple, a piece of cedar, and some of the veneers. I'm probably not going to use all these, otherwise it'll be too tall and out of proportion. The palm, I'm going to glue it on and use probably half of this or 2/3 of it in the center. And the veneers are, even this thicker one, which is about a 16, you could cut it easily with a pair of scissors. You just cut them up. You have to be kind of careful because they are fragile and they will break. So, first thing, my dust mask.
Who is that masked man?
Desperado, my turning hat. This is good for when you shoot something up in the air and you're looking for it, it comes back down right on top of your head. Okay, first thing I want to do is cut off the cherry burl that I'm not going to be using. Just start off with the parting tool. I want to get this surface flat. Now if you notice, I've been teaching a lot of people over the last 16 years. And most people I say, you're pointing the parting tool right at the center of the wood. It needs to be up in the air. This is a bevel. Think rubbing the bevel. This is one of the tools that will not bite you in the ass with the bad catch if you're not on the bevel. But you should not be pointing at straight dead center. Up here it cuts so much better. Now I will be stopping and checking to see if it's flat. Now the center can be a little concave because when I'm doing a bowl, this outer edge is all that's going to be left. And that's where it needs the good glue joint. The center doesn't matter as much. From here to my glue block, it should be glued flat. Because if you're cutting down in and trying to cut that off and you hit an empty spot, your piece is going to go. If you're cutting down inside, hollowing out a little bowl or hollow vessel, and the center is not glued, it's not really much of a big deal. That way a bigger chunk comes out and you don't have to worry about it. Just taking a straight edge. It's not rocking. It looks pretty good to me. Now I usually take a little 120 grit sandpaper, but I neglected to bring any. Now this cherry is a little dark, so I'm going to put a piece of the yellow first. I have a smaller piece. Just kind of eyeball it. Cut it a little bit big. Now I like to cut the corners off before I glue it on. That way, when I'm turning, I'm not running into these corners, which is going to splinter it off. I'll put a piece of red in there too.
You run the grain in the same direction?
No. When I glue this up, I usually cross the grain. Like this grain goes across there, and this grain I canter it over so it's about 90 degrees. It just makes it a little bit stronger. Now Jim McPhail, when he makes his, he has square blocks the same size, and he just glues up a straight stack. And then he cuts the corners off on the bandsaw. So he has this leftover piece with all the wood. Every piece he does is numbered on the bottom. Like D has 3 of his pieces from 2007. You can call him up and say, I got piece number 107. And he'll look it up and he goes, okay, you have Paduke and Blackwood, and he's got the list of all those pieces of wood. And he can tell you exactly what they are. Now you can also glue up 2 of the same color if you want it thicker, without buying the thicker one. Now a thing to know is CA glue will come through this veneer. So if you think you're going to hold it on like that, your fingers are going to get glued to this veneer. If you do it on the top, it's like you have colored fingernails, and that's not so bad. Unless you're a guy, maybe. But it will come through. So you need to plan to put it on with another piece of wood, your next bigger piece. Now, the scraps I have left over, like this palm, you can see on the camera, this is thinner than this section. This is not a true square parallel piece. I have taken one side and flattened one side on the belt sander. So I have one true flat side. Joe, he flattens one side on the belt sander, then flips it over, flattens the other side. You think they'll be parallel? No. Almost always you're putting pressure and one side's going to be angled. That way he stacks them up and your piece is spinning and you can see the lines wavering. After he cuts the top, that top is true. And when they're sitting there, you don't really notice it. But on the lathe, when it's speeding up or almost stopped, you can really see it going. So that's something else you need to consider. And I've got all of these wonderful pieces. What would look good on top of the yellow and red? I think I'll do yellow and then red and then a piece of the maple. So we'll go with that. Now I like to glue it with this upside down. So I want to remove this from the chuck. to take it out of the chuck. I want to remove the chuck off the lathe. This allows me to either glue them like this, and I can line them up better, because trying to glue them on from the side, you're going to glue them off. Joe come in with one and it kind of all went like the Leaning Tower of pizza. And so instead of a piece that big, you ended up with a piece about that big, half the diameter. I need to see which side I flattened. These are actually both flattened on this one. You want to use the medium density or the thick glue. Put some down. Put on the red. Another thing is know where your acetone is so you can get yourself unglued. Cross the grain. Try and center it a little bit. Give it a little shot. Get it on there as straight as you can. Few seconds. Another thing you want to do is not glue yourself to something you can't pick up. Herbie, who comes to my studio, he was making a little box, like my camper boxes with the inserts, and he cut a recess about that big around and has these little glass bead rocks, a whole jar full of them. So he's filling them up in there. And Herbie's blind at 86, so I usually glue them up for him, but there was 3 other people there, and he, see, that's way off center. There's nothing we can do about it now. So he took it in the other room and took the glue and was holding the box lid and just dumping the glue in like that. Then he got too much and he tipped it and it all ran out all over his hand, and he grabbed his other hand trying to get it off. And he'd come in and all these fingers were glued together, and this hand was glued to the box lid. And he's going, help, help! I have a bottle of fingernail polish remover, which I promptly sprayed. We got his fingers kind of apart. It took about 20 minutes. I had to get some acetone and soak in. Okay, now since this one is flat already, I think I want to check it anyway. And you can glue them all up straight flat. If you had a bigger board, you run it through one of those sanders, which screws it up. It'll save you some time, but I want to have everything good. See, now that's true enough. That's really true. Now, if you notice, I kind of went over this way with the glue, and it will spritz out and get on you and whatever. And one gentleman who comes to my studio, he glued up, he had a nice piece on, and he was filling the cracks with the glue, and I just happened to glance over, and he was using the thin glue. And I watched him gluing it, and I looked up, and he did this. He picked this up and did that, standing right here. And I saw a great big drop come off and hit him directly on the open eyeball. So, you got to use sense, people. I mean, before you turn that on, if there's glue, don't stand right there. Have your eye protection on. Okay, I think we're going to go for another couple of veneers. I want a little bit bigger pieces. I'm going to do yellow, black, yellow. Then we'll do the palm. I'll throw in a thicker piece of the black. There is some waste involved in this. You can plan it out to not have so much waste. Now, if you're really stingy with your money, these little triangles I'm cutting off, you can pick them all up and do a mosaic out of them too. It just depends how creative you want to get. I just sweep them up. You know, if somebody wants me to save them, if you want to pick them out of the bag of chips, that's okay. Okay, now this one we're going to try and glue it this way, just so you can see. I'm going to do my piece of palm. Just see my ruler. Okay, so this is the flat side. Is that other piece of palm in that box that's going around?
Yes.
Toss that up here. Not that one, the smaller one. Show it. Yeah, that's tough.
The box is 1 feet short.
All right. Let's see if a few people are on it. And you will get some glue on you. Now usually I'm at a lathe where my tools are not right here, and I would just pull a tailstock up quickly. So now I want to round this out, because I'm going to cut half of this palm off. Those right now. Now I'm doing all side grain on this piece. One piece I did, the center section, I had a piece of in-grain Wenge in there. And as I was coming up, cutting the shape, following the side grain, smaller to larger on the outside, I hit that Wenge, and all the way around that stuff just kind of chipped and exploded out. And it almost cut the diameter in half because I had that in grain in here with all the side grain. And you need to cut it in an opposite direction. Now this is a little off also. I need the tailstock for support. Now it's better if you leave this stuff sit for about 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And if you start feeling the fumes getting you in your eyes or in your lungs, just take a step back, you know, blink your eyes, close them, breathe, get the stuff out of your face. I'm going to try and do very light cuts, just to true it up to start with. Now the palm, I want to come from the other direction.
Why?
So if I come off of this, I'm probably going to take some big chunks of it off. I'm using a bowl gouge right now. You do not want to use the spindle roughing gouge on side grain. But this will just come all to pieces. Do not use that tool. Now I'm using a bowl gouge. Everybody knows what rubbing the bevel is, right? For cutting in this direction, the tool needs to be angled not quite 45 degrees that direction. Depends on the angle of your bevel here. If I'm rubbing the bevel off the point and I have the tool turned over too much, I'm not doing a bevel rubbing cut. The cut happens from the point around this right side. If my tool is rolled over, the edge, which is cutting, is now way over like that. It's not rubbing the bevel. You need to have the tool up so the bevel is rubbing over on this section that you're actually doing the cutting with. If you're doing a very shallow cut, almost nothing cut, yeah, you can have it turned kind of over on its side. But remember, that cut is from here over to here. You may be rubbing the bevel on the point, but all this, if you're over here, is not a bevel rubbing cut. It will cut a lot better, a lot faster, a lot smoother, and your tool will stay sharp longer. There's such a fine line of being on your bevel and being off of it. And that's just one thing you need to understand. When you're on that cut like that, the cut is just so fast, you gotta try and keep up with it. If you're over too much, you're doing a scraping cut. I'm just doing a pivoting cut on a fulcrum. I'm not pulling the tool across the tool rest. That's your most stable cut. I'm just pushing it with my hip. The tool is against my body. When I'm getting up to the veneer and the palm, I'm slowing down. Okay, now these veneers, I don't know what the wood is, but this is some stringy wood. And a lot of times, if it's not stabilized or saturated with the glue, along here, you'll come around and you will hit the end grain and you'll be popping pieces out down into your blank. So I usually come back with the thin glue and hit all the veneers with the thin CA glue. And that really soaks in and stabilizes it. I don't know if you can see, there's a fiber of the yellow veneer sticking up right here.
Yep.
So I glue it when I'm close to where I want to be. I'm going to be cutting at least another 1/8 inch deep right there. And this will keep the fibers of the wood intact. I will probably be doing that on the palm too, because the palm is very difficult to work on. And then again, whenever you're gluing, do not be standing right here when you turn it on. I usually watch the tool rest, and you can see little spritzes of glue coming out, sticking on there, and that lets me know it's not dry enough. What I just did is probably dry enough now. I'm going to take off this edge and then cut some of this palm off because it's too thick. Okay, and there's no splatter on the tool rest. Now this palm is too thick, so I want to cut some off. I usually, see, we lost a big chunk of the palm right here. This stuff is not nice to work on. So I'm going to glue, especially these end fibers on both sides, because that's where it's going to be doing the most problems. I usually don't glue all the way around. Now, the top half of this palm, the fibers are little, it's almost all white on the end. So what I would usually do is I would flatten this side out completely. That way when I cut it off, I know I got one side that's already flat. Because if I cut it off too thin, it's hard to get it on a belt sander. And if I already drew it up here, I would do that. I'm not going to do that on this one. Now remember, never cut anything completely off with the tailstock on. I could just check quickly, see if it's flat, kind of a high spot in the middle. All that's going to be gone, so it doesn't matter right now. Okay, this outer 1/2 inch is flat. I'm going to glue on my next layer. I don't think we're going to get to this one because that's a little smaller than I planned, since I did not glue it up straight. Maybe we'll just go with that. I'm just kind of eyeballing it for size. We got a yellow. Just cut it too small, so that's one for a different one. That's what's nice about this stuff is you can use it on other pieces. So I got black, yellow, black. I'm going to follow that again. This is the side that's flat. I think I want to do black against that, so I'll just do a yellow and a black. And again, there are a lot of different ways you can do this. See, that blue is coming right through this black already. Now if I'm looking straight down on the top of this, I can kind of eyeball this in relation to the piece on the chuck. And to get it fairly true before I put pressure on it. Now that's a real exciting demonstration watching glue dry.
I need one like that.
Yeah, I know. I'm knocking you off. I only learn from the best. Now speaking of the best, this Saturday up in West Palm Beach at the Okie Park on Forest Hill Boulevard at the Turnpike, Mark St. Ledger is giving an all-day Saturday workshop to sit and watch all day long. He's an outstanding turner. He's actually a shop teacher. And you don't see shop teachers very much lately around, so he knows what he's doing. And it's $40 for the day and $5 if you want the lunch. They're going to run up to Publix to get subs. And then they're having 2 or 3 days of hands-on turning. If you can take time, it's probably like 50 miles from here. It'd be worth going up and seeing this guy. I was at, the last time I was demonstrating at the Florida Woodturning Symposium. He was one of the demonstrators there too. Very, very good.
That's this Saturday.
That's this Saturday.
What park is it?
Okie Park. It's on Forest Hill Boulevard, west of 95, about, I don't know, 6 miles or so. And you have to go to the Nature Center all the way in the back of the park. There are signs.
Get off at Lake Ward.
5 minutes?
Go up the turnpike, get off at Lake Ward.
Yeah, there's no exit at Forest Hill.
Then you go up 441.
Just trying to do a real quick little bowl shape. Get down through all the bad stuff. Now I like to have the outside shape done before I do the inside. Okay, that's a nice little bowl shape. True up the face first. That's going to be the top of my bowl. And then hollowing, it's just like hollowing out a regular side grain bowl. You can drill a hole if you want, it's not necessary. Side grain, it comes out a lot quicker than on end grain. Always need to check your height. I like to cut slightly above the center line, which is right there. And then when I'm close to the center, bring it down to center line. And with all the layers, it's easy to tell where you're at on the inside. And again, the angle of the gouge is so I'm cutting on this right side. I'm rubbing the bevel on the right side. I'm not way over like that. Makes a difference. See, there was no glue in that center bit there. And I'm getting into the palm, so I want to switch over to a round nose scraper. So just a round nose scraper. I need to raise my tool rest so my cutting edge with the tool flat is at center or slightly above. If you're right on the cusp of that or slightly below, that's where catches happen and dig-ins. If you're above it, you're in a safe zone. Well, I was hitting the palm, and I think that would be grabbing the fibers too hard. And scrapers work better with the lay sped up. And when you start hearing that high pitch, it's getting thin. I just went through the red and the yellow layer and I'm into the cherry burl. So at this point, if I'm as deep as I want to go, I'm heading to the burl, so I don't want to go any deeper because that's going to be the bottom of my piece. I would go ahead and sand all the surfaces, and if I was doing turquoise and any voids or some other stone, I would go ahead, leave it on here, take the chuck off again, fill those, sand them down flush, and then sand it on the lathe. And then go ahead and part this off, reverse chuck it, and cut the bottom off just like we do with any other piece. Any quick questions? Yes, sir.
On those first 4 that you passed around, you were going to
said, well, I'll chuck this up and put some turquoise on this one.
Yeah.
How do you chuck that?
Well, I would put a block on like this, turn a little recess that the bottom of that fit into, and I would glue it into place.
Okay.
And then just recut that wood off the bottom. There's finish on it, so the glue is not going to soak into the wood. But that, I would, if I do a little recess, even a 1/16 inch deep, that base fits down into and is flat in there, that should be absolutely true, unless the wood is warped. And then it may not be possible to do that.
Okay.
Yes?
And you recessed on that waste block right there, or is it flush?
Oh, that's flush. Yeah, this one was flush. And this was just another one, but I had a piece of burl that was about 1 inch thick on there. So I didn't want to use all that. All right, well, we have to be out the gate by 9 o'clock, and it's 1/4 till, according to that clock.